When I was in, the seventh grade, I think, I made a friend who had just moved to our neighborhood, Danny Syed. And I was over visiting him one day after school, and his sister had this music on in her room that was just like drew me in. There were instruments in the music that sounded familiar, like the tabla and the tambura, instruments that I was familiar with. But then there was singing, and the singing was in English. So Danny was like, "Oh yeah, my sister's into Loreena McKennitt," and I didn't know who that was, but I soon became familiar with Loreena McKennitt and became a fan, and am still a fan of Loreena McKennitt. I saw her here in New York at the town hall just last year. So my love of her music goes back a long time, decades. And there was an album that she put out, I think even before I was born, but it was an album that I love. It's called The Visit. And in the liner notes of that album, she opens it up by saying something that I read quite a few times and never forgot. Kind of remembered it verbatim because it was so powerful to me. The album's called The Visit. And she said, "I have long considered the creative impulse to be a thing of grace or beauty, not commanded or owned so much as awaited or prepared for." And then she goes on to talk about the album. But why that stayed with me was because what she said correlated with the image on the cover of that album. One of the things I love about her is just sort of this character that she has created. I mean, maybe it's her, maybe it's not. But the album is like, it's spooky, it's dark out. It looks like the only light is coming from like an oil lamp or a candle. And she's wearing like a witchy dress, and her hair is like wild, and she's at a door, I think. She's about to knock, or she's at the door, like she's going to knock. And when she described the inspiration for the album, it seemed to really echo the image that creativity isn't something, as she said, that you can command and just make happen. You have to wait for it, and it comes. And when it comes, you open the door. At that point, when I read that, the reason why I connected with it was because I knew that feeling. I knew that feeling as a child, especially when I had homework that I had to do or school projects and I didn't want to do them and I wanted to do something else instead. And then I did those things. Like, there were many nights when I should have been studying for an exam and instead I was practicing calligraphy or weaving on my loom. And that that was a kind of rebellion because I didn't like being told what to do, but it was also not a rebellion. It was also listening to something that was calling and opening the door and allowing it to come inside, knowing that it wasn't always going to be there. That is really something that I still do, and because I've been doing it for so long, I've learned how important it is to be aware that you might think you want to do something, like learn pottery or take an oil painting class or take a watercolor class or to embroider something at home or to mend a garment. But sometimes, you think you want to do it, and then you sit down, you have all of your supplies, and you attempt it, and there's something that's lacking, and that something that's lacking is on the inside. That motivation, the spark, just isn't there. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to come, or that it wasn't there, like when you first had the idea. It just means that it isn't there in that moment. We all have priorities in our lives, and we all have to set those priorities. If you have children, usually children are the priority. They come first before anything else. Or paying the bills, paying the rent. I have my priorities, and I try to be responsible to make sure that those are addressed. But I've also really learned how important it is to not always be completely responsible. I have some loved ones that were raised in a way where they did what our parents told them to do. They did the responsible, smart, wise thing always. They followed all of the rules. And in their adult life, life has a way of showing you that that doesn't always give you satisfaction or happiness or a feeling of being satiated. Just because you're responsible and just because you follow all the rules, it doesn't mean that you're going to really achieve what you want to achieve inside. Part of achieving what you want to achieve inside is knowing what you want to achieve inside. And I think that this is where this irresponsibility comes in. So the point of this is that every now and then in my life, I'm struck with this creative impulse that has shown up at the door and is knocking, and I have to open the door. I have to put everything else aside and do that thing while striking while the iron is hot. So recently I went to this Halloween ball at the Frick, and I went with two of my friends, Kyle and Kyle. And one Kyle wore a masquerade mask. The other Kyle, I helped him put his costume together. It was kind of a slapdash affair. We just like gathered a bunch of things and did it. We went down to the garment district and bought feathers, and we replaced the buttons on the costume that we purchased. And he ended up looking fantastic. He was the belle of the ball. Everybody wanted a picture with him. I was really inspired to just see him transform. He's usually shy. He's usually in the shadows. Doesn't like to be the center of attention, doesn't like eyes on him. But that's the wonderful magic about a costume, is that you can become someone else. You can hide behind it, or you can step into somebody else's shoes and feel what it would feel like to be a gentleman in the late 1700s. Seeing Kyle in his costume with the hat, with the feathers, really made me regret that I had not pushed myself to finish my Halloween costume, my forever Halloween costume. Not that I would have had time this year to do it, because the work is going to take a very, very, very long time. But after the ball, after Halloween, there was a knock at the door. And the knock at the door was, it's time to work on your costume. Like, it's time to really get to work. So I called Alexa, my friend who has drafted the pattern and made a toile and cut the silk out and slashed the silk. Alexa came over and she gave me a sewing lesson using old techniques. Let's see here. So these are the two books that I'm using. 17th century men's dress patterns, and these are based on actual pieces of clothing in the Victoria and Albert Museum. So we're copying a doublet and trunk hose that actually exists, which is great. And then this is the other book that I'm using. This is a classic. Many people in the historic costuming world have this book, Patterns of Fashion by Janet Arnold, 1540 to 1660, the cut and construction of linen shirts, smocks, and neckwear. So I have to make a shirt first. The shirt is going to be a linen shirt based on a shirt from the 1620s. And it's a shirt that I think is from Stockholm that the king was shot in. So there's a big hole, or there's a part of a hole in the shirt, and then a big blood stain on the shirt. Which in this fascinating book, where no stone has left unturned, I have to find this. I have to show you the bloodstained shirt. It is from 1627, and very few shirts survive from this period, because your shirt was like your underwear. So you wore it out. And when the shirt was worn out, it would be turned into other things. Eventually, it would just be sold to the rag man, who would collect it to turn into paper. So we don't have these undergarments from this period. The only ones that survive are usually the ones that belong to someone very important, like a lord or a duke or a king, not from the common person. This book is just fascinating. Oh, here it is. Okay. White linen shirt worn by Gustaf II Adolf when he was wounded by a bullet which pierced his thigh at Kleinwerder in 1627. Livrustkammaren, Stockholm. I went to that museum. It was a fantastic museum. And here is the shirt. Right there. And you can see the blood stain on it. So I'm going to copy that. Did I show it properly? I'm going to copy that. And then after making the shirt, I'm going to start on the actual outer garments, the doublet and the trunk hose. So Alexa came over and she reminded me, because I have done this before, pad stitching for the understructure, layers of wool, linen that will then be attached to the outer silk layer. The silk will be slashed, and the whole thing is going to be hand stitched. In anticipation of this costume, I started looking for old linen, specifically in markets in Europe. So when I was in Munich, there's a market that I go to regularly that has a new modern side. This happens 4 times a year. And then an antique section. And in the antique section, there's a lady that sells antique linen. So I looked through all of her stuff and I found fantastic old, like unused, just on a bolt, linen that was very fine and a narrow width, which indicates that it's old, it's not modern, that had been starched. And it's kind of discolored because it's so old, but I started soaking it in the tub to get out all of the stains, and I'm going to be washing it for the course of a few days, and I'm going to start on this costume, which I'm so excited about. I haven't hand sewn something so elaborate in a very long time. But here's the thing. That impulse, when it comes, it usually means I'll have to set aside other things. There are the things that are mandatory every day that I have to do, that I just say, no, you have to do. There are some jobs that I have that are paying the bills, so I have to do those. I have to practice the harp every day for an hour. Those are non-negotiables. But it just means sometimes I get caught up in the work, like this kind of work, and I forget to eat lunch. That's what goes. Something has to go. Something has to be sort of set aside in order to make these things work. The other thing that has sort of struck me as inspiration, kind of big inspiration, which is not as daunting a task as making that Halloween costume, is something that I'm going to do this afternoon. So tomorrow I'm going to a second cousin's wedding in Houston, Texas. I'm going to wear one of my Indian outfits that was custom made. And I was going to give the couple a card. One of the cards that I sell on my website, actually, like a flourished fish that I did by hand and then had letterpressed. But then, I don't know, in my head I saw something different. An image popped up. An image painted by a fantastic Indian painter from the 19th century, Raja Ravi Varma. And Raja Ravi Varma famously painted Hindu deities. His portraits of Lakshmi and Saraswati exist in a palace in India. And a print of the Lakshmi is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's kind of iconic. This print, for over 100 years, has been printed and is in the homes of many worshipping Hindus. The images of Saraswati and Lakshmi being the ones by Raja Ravi Varma. So I love his work. It's so beautiful in a classical way. And I thought what I would like to do is do a very simplified version of the painting of Lakshmi on a piece of watercolor paper that I turn into a card. And that will be the wedding card that I gift my second cousin and his new wife. So I went out this morning, and because the only thing that I didn't have were large envelopes, and I went to the paper source and I couldn't decide between the yellow or the ivory colored envelopes. I will know once the painting is done. This is also something that might not work. And this is a thing that I put into my head. Don't have the expectation that you're going to achieve something, and be fine with that. Be fine with the adventure. The adventure really is what counts. So my hope is that I will be able to paint something that I'm happy with. If I'm happy with it, I'll fold it up and put it into the envelope, and if not, then I'll use one of the cards that I already have. But I'm really excited. I'm really excited to paint a watercolor card for a relative, copying something that I've known and loved for a long time. This is it. This is the visit that comes knocking at the door, the visit that you hope for, you might wait for, but you don't know when it's going to arrive. And when it arrives, sometimes you just have to set everything else aside to allow the visitor, the creative impulse, to come in and to be with you for hopefully as long as possible. That's how I do it.